Howdy out there, folks. Today I'm just going to do a quick collection overview video. This will be my first, and this video is going to go over my Scream Factory, Shout Factory releases that I own. And let's go ahead and start with, of course, John Sayles' Alligator in 4K. Great film. I think much smarter than it has a right to be, and that's courtesy of John Sayles' wonderful script. The Babadook. This is a movie that I actually really enjoyed. I know it has its detractors, but Jennifer Kent is a disciple of David Lynch's, and it has a really cool atmosphere about it and a terrific sound design. The kid is annoying. There's no denying that, and I've heard people say that he makes it almost unwatchable, but I don't think so. I think it's a terrific low-budget film with a very creepy sound and visual design. Then we've got the 1988 remake of The Blob, one of my favorites. Frank Darabont wrote it, and Chuck Russell directed it. And it has just top shelf practical effects, and of course the wonderful Kevin Dillon and his mullet. Then we have the original Candyman, Tony Todd, 1992. I tried to watch the remake. I couldn't get through it, and I got what they were trying to do, and I wasn't offended by. I know some people complained that it was woke. I just thought it was kind of boring. I just really couldn't finish it, strangely enough. Creepshow, classic George A. Romero, Stephen King collaboration from 1982, and one of the best horror anthology movies ever made. Of course, there's Fluffy, the crate monster. Stephen King has a cameo in it in one of the segments. This is a great film, and Scream Factory did a terrific job with this release. I'm sure it's going to get a 4K Blu-ray release at some point, but the work they did on the transfer is nothing short of stunning. Then we have The Dead Zone, one of my favorites, if not my absolute favorite, David Cronenberg films, and it's much more traditional in scope than a lot of his other films. But I thought Chris Walken and Martin Sheen were both amazing in it, and of course it also stars Brooke Adams, Tom Skerritt. It's a very, very effective film, and Mark Irwin was the DP on this movie, and he did a wonderful job. I think this is a terrific film. It's one of my favorites. Dudes, I forgot to mention here, John Cryer flick, Penelope Spheris film. Of course, she also did Suburbia, which I own as well as Wayne's World. And I like this movie. It's not a great film. It's definitely a little weak in spots, and the narrative is all over the place, but I still enjoy it. I remember seeing it on VHS way back in the day, and I had a good time watching it, and I think it's an excellent time capsule of 1980s independent film. And John Cryer does a great job. I enjoy it. And of course, it also stars a very young Flea. Then we have the Scream Factory Fly box set, which is terrific. Love it. Love the packaging, and it of course includes all 5 Fly movies. I really enjoy the original Fly. I think they did a great job. Obviously the effects are pretty weak, but for the time it was pretty impressive, especially the fly head. Now, of course, David Cronenberg redid it in '86 with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis, and it's amazing. It's such a good film. It holds up. Now, The Fly 2 was directed by the gentleman who did all the effects work in the Fly remake, and it's more of a campy romp with a absolutely hysterical montage set to a Katie Lang song midway through. Eric Stoltz is in it. I really like him. I think he's one of those sort of criminally underrated actors who was never really able to flourish in a way that I think he deserved. It would have really been interesting to see his version of Marty McFly in Back to the Future, which of course he was originally cast in that role and I think Robert Zemeckis canned him about 6 weeks into the production. There are some scenes that are available. It would have been a much different film. Michael J. Fox did a great job, and I'm sure at the end of the day he was the better actor, but I think that Eric Stoltz could have made the role pretty interesting. Then we have Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse, a really good film. I enjoy watching that. The atmosphere is just terrific. He's one of those just atmosphere directors that every film he did just looked amazing. Glengarry Glen Ross, this is a Shout Select release. Really amazing film. The acting in it is just top shelf, and it's got just an amazing cast. Al Pacino, Jack Lemmon, Alec Baldwin, Ed Harris, Alan Arkin, Kevin Spacey, and Jonathan Pryce. They're all just terrific in it. I heard that when they were filming it, a lot of the actors came on set even on days they weren't shooting just to watch their colleagues at work, and I can believe it. They all did a great job. Then we have another John Sayles scripted film, The Howling, directed by Joe Dante, a movie I really enjoyed seeing when I was a kid in theaters, and I love having it on my shelf. I also own the American Werewolf in London, the Arrow video Blu-ray release, movie of the same year, and very similar. Both are excellent. I probably like The Howling a little better just because I think the screenplay is sharper. Then we have Into the Night, another John Landis film starring Jeff Goldblum and the lovely Michelle Pfeiffer. I remember just being enthralled by her on the big screen. She was so beautiful in that movie, and it's a fun film. LA Story, Steve Martin, very funny LA comedy from 1990. Then we have Manhunter, Michael Mann movie. It's a story about the Red Dragon, basically, the Red Dragon killer, and also features Hannibal Lecter. But in this film, Brian Cox from Succession plays Lecter, and William Peterson, of course, from CSI fame. He does a great job as the Will Graham character, and Tom Noonan is really creepy as the Tooth Fairy. Then we have Memoirs of an Invisible Man, Chevy Chase, Daryl Hannah. This is a John Carpenter directed film, also starred Sam Neill. I really liked it. The effects are amazing. They still hold up. Motel Hell. Now this is a really interesting, campy, almost like Texas Chainsaw adjacent film. Hard to classify. Its tone, the tone is all over the place, but I think it's really meant to be a horror comedy, and I think it's a pretty good flick. And the Steelbook, it looks great, and the 4K transfer they did looks really sharp. Then we have Nosferatu the Vampire. This is the remake of the original Nosferatu, and of course Klaus Kinski plays the lead role that Max Schreck played in the original, and Bruno Ganz, who was also in I want to say Wings of Desire, the Wim Wenders film. He's in it. I think he plays the Renfeld character, or actually another character in the film. He's quite good in it as well, and Isabella Adjani as well. But this is a good movie. The locations on this film are stunning. Werner Herzog really knows how to lens a movie. It's a beautiful looking movie and filled with atmosphere. Then we have the 4K Steelbook of Psycho, terrific film. Then we have what is it? The sequel, Psycho 2, directed by I want to say Mr. Franklin. Let's see here. Yes, Richard Franklin, a known. Apparently, he was at, I believe, USC Film School, and was just a complete Hitchcock nut, and really was kind of like his unofficial protege. And he was thrilled to have, of course, been given this opportunity, and I think he did a great job. Psycho 2 is an excellent sequel, in some ways better than the original. I mean, I say that knowing that the original is really untouchable as far as its impact on film culture and history, but I really enjoy Psycho 2 quite a bit. Now, Psycho 3 isn't as good in the traditional sense as the first two, but strangely enough, I actually find myself going back to this one more often than not. I think Anthony Perkins rather, does a wonderful job in the part again, and I believe he directs this film, and it has Jed Fahey in it. I mean, it's just crazy. It's a really weird movie, but I enjoy it quite a bit. It has some terrific moments in the film. It's just a lot of fun. Then there's Q, the Wing Serpent. This is, of course, a Larry Cohen movie with Michael Moriarty doing his just absolute crazy. Nobody could do Michael Moriarty crazy like Michael Moriarty. I mean, he was just terrific in this. And of course, David Carradine, Richard Roundtree, and Candy Clark also were in it. All very good. Then we have Rent-A-Pal, a film starring Will Wheaton and Brian Landis Fulkins. And this is a good flick. I enjoyed it. Low budget film, came out around the beginning of the pandemic. And I found it very creepy. Will Wheaton was really weird. Then we have of course, the classic Return of the Living Dead, 1986, I want to say. Really good, 85 actually. Really good flick. Surprisingly funny and scary. It, I think, in many ways exceeded many people's expectations. I remember seeing it in theaters and not expecting much and really being entertained. I think it's probably one of the best zombie movies ever made. Great soundtrack, too. Then we've got Road Games, starring Stacy Keach and a very young Jamie Lee Curtis, also directed by Richard Franklin. And this is sort of like Rear Window, but on the highway, set in Australia. Then we, of course, have RoboCop II, which I remember seeing in theaters and being pretty bummed out afterwards. It's a sort of mean and nihilistic RoboCop, but I'll be damned if it doesn't have some inspired moments. I think the first one is definitely the better film, but there are moments in this film that I think exceed anything that was done in RoboCop 1. But I think as overall, the movie it has structure and narrative problems, but it's definitely an interesting watch and one of the better pieces of sci-fi to come out over the last 30 or 40 years, despite the fact that its story has some problems. Then we have RoboCop 3, which is a kind of a cinematic abomination, to be honest. And Robert Burke took over the role Peter Weller had, and he didn't do a bad job. I thought he was okay. I mean, I would have preferred to see Peter Weller, but it wasn't Burke's fault. This movie just it totally. I mean, it was PG-13. What were they thinking? And the effect work is pretty hinky as well. I mean, I wouldn't. It's not a very good film, but it's still interesting for those of you who like the RoboCop series. I think it's still worth having on the shelf, and Scream Factory did a great job with the release, with a lot of the supplemental features going into the sort of train wreck production. Then we have Serial Mom, signed by John Waters. I think this is his best film. Kathleen Turner's terrific in it. It's funny. It definitely sort of feels like it's in my universe of sensibilities, and I think it's aged very well. I remember when I first saw it, I wasn't all that impressed, but over the years, I've come to really appreciate it. And I think John Waters really, that was his most mature film. Then we have Session 9, which is a really, the atmosphere in this is just, it drips with dread. And I really enjoy this film. It's not perfect. I think the narrative, the script probably could have used another polish, but the location that they filmed the movie on is just so creepy, very Shining-esque, and a good low-budget horror film. And we have Silver Bullet, of course, Corey Haim, Gary Busey, based on a Stephen King short, and just a great film. I really enjoyed this movie. It's well done. Of course, the effect work was a little dodgy, and it's been known as sort of the Werewolf movie because the werewolf looks more like a bear than a werewolf. but I still enjoy it. Gary Busey's great in it. Then we have Single White Female, Bridget Fonda, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and directed by Barbette Schroeder, and just a masterclass in acting by Jennifer Jason Leigh. She's so good in it. Starman, one of my favorite John Carpenter films. I think that Jeff Bridges was criminally overlooked that year. I think he should have gotten an Oscar nomination, probably even won it. He was so good in it, and I find the romance to be very believable, and it's just a touching film. I remember seeing this one in theaters and being genuinely moved. I think it's a nice entry in Carpenter's catalog that is one of his best, in my opinion. And the commentary is quite good as well with Jeff Bridges and John Carpenter. Then we have The Stepfather, Terry O'Quinn playing a really creepy stepfather based, I believe, on a true story, or at least loosely based on a real person. And of course, Terry Quinn went on to have a pretty impressive career in television with the show Millennium and Lost, and also I think one season of another Chris Carter endeavor that was, to this day, I don't understand why they did it, because they canceled Millennium and right after early 99. So the very year that the Millennium was to occur, they canceled it, which drove me insane, because I thought Chris Carter really had something with that show, despite some of the sort of unevenness of it. But Terry Quinn, just amazing in this film. He's so good. Then we have Streets of Fire, Willem Dafoe, Walter Hill movie. Very weird, very, very interesting visually, and good soundtrack as well. And Willem Dafoe is just amazing in it. I think he really makes the film. And then we have Suburbia, the other Penelope Spheres movie that I have. And of course, this film is known for its casting of real, non-actors in the part of these punkers. I believe there's only like one or two actual actors in the film. The rest were just basically people in that culture that were asked to be in this film. And it does show. It's not a great acting piece, but it's an interesting experiment, and I think a really fascinating look at sort of LA punk scene circa 1980, early 80s. It's a great film and fits sort of alongside like Repo Man and some others of that era. Then we have another John Carpenter film, The Thing. This is the 2-disc collector's edition. I also own the more recent 4K Blu-ray release that came out. But I love this. The supplements on this are just terrific, and I like the transfer. Like, it looks good. The 4K disc does look a little better, but I don't think demonstrably so. And so if you have the Scream Factory release, I would probably just advise you to stick with that. Then you've got the 3 O'Clock High, which of course is a classic, though little seen, 80s high school flick with Casey Shamasco playing the lead part, and goodness, who's the gentleman who played, Richard Tyson played Buddy Revell, who was the bully. And really interesting editing in this. And it's funny, the director talked about how basically it was his version of After Hours, like the story, the editing. He was basically ripping off Scorsese. But I enjoyed it. It's a good high school flick. And then lastly, we have Willard, the remake starring Crispin Glover. This movie is quite good. I think Crispin does a fantastic job. I also believe that, who is in this? There's also Arlie Ermy is in this. Laura Elena Herring, who was in Mulholland Drive. Its DP is Robert McLaughlin, who just does an amazing job. And I think the director is Glenn Morgan. This movie is surprisingly effective and visually just stunning, and the soundtrack as well. I mean, I'll be honest, watching it on a 5.1 surround sound system, you feel as though rats are running around your living room or wherever your screening room is. It's quite good. I really enjoy this film. And Crispin Glover, he's just a force of nature. Such a strange man, but undeniably talented. So on that note, I think this is it for now. I'll probably try to put together a few more videos of, for example, my Criterion collection. I have some Arrow videos, Imprint, Kino Lorber, etc. But those are for another time. So on that note, please take care out there, everyone. Stay safe, be kind, and by all means, keep watching good cinema.